Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Learning Rebels Coffee Chat, where all the cool L&D peeps hang out. Here we discuss ideas, experiences, and share stories about L&D specific topics. I'm Shannon Tipton, owner of Learning Rebels, where we strategically fix training that's broken and develop workplace learning that delivers desired business results. Today, the cool kids are sharing their thoughts and ideas about harvesting organizational knowledge and stories. We are seeing more people retire or change positions faster than in any other previous year. And this is due to a variety of reasons. But one main reason is a lack of connection to the organization. If people don't feel as though they are part of the organizational beating heart, then why hang out? And they don't. So the key to helping people connect is through the sharing of knowledge and stories. And while we're talking about the criticality of harvesting knowledge, let's not forget about the importance of harvesting passion. Team members want to know about the passion that drives leaders and their own teammates. Now, employees don't need to share the same passions for a company's story in order to resonate with it. People respond to passion, and passion is the heartbeat of any organization. Every company is held up by people seeking to do something good, and they have a relevant story to tell. The key is to find it or risk losing the knowledge forever. So the big question on the table today is, how can we better find, share, and store organizational knowledge and stories that are at risk of leaving the business every day? So, without further ado, let's get to it. Welcome, everybody. And today we are talking about harvesting the knowledge and stories of your organization. How can we go about doing a better job? Or how do we do a better job of storing them, of sharing them? Because let's face it, today businesses are connected through the stories that tie them together. Part of the reason that people leave an organization is a lack of connectedness. You know, there's a lot of other things obviously at play. You talk about culture, or you talk about no work-life balance, or being underpaid, or what have you. There are a lot of mitigating factors there that make a person want to leave. But if a person felt connected to their organization, a person's going to think twice before they leave because they have a built-in community of sorts. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that it does become a competitive differentiator when your organization has a grasp on the knowledge that sits within it. You know, where if somebody should happen to leave, then they have that person's knowledge. They're able to still carry forward. There's a business that I do business with, that I work with. And if one more person left that organization would fall apart. And that's not the way it should be. So, my friends, my rebel friends, I'm going to turn this over to you. And I would love to hear, first off, how are you? I always hesitate to use the term best practices because what works for you isn't necessarily going to work for me, but I'll just say, what are the practices that work for you and work for your organization? So who's going to kick this off and share their experiences in regards to harvesting organizational intelligence, or getting your people to share their knowledge stories or even cultural stories?
If no one else will go, I'll go. I will say that my first experience, in terms of getting organizational knowledge out of individuals was in a call center. And what I found was really effective was just taking them out for lunch before you start the conversation. conversation, right? For me, one of the big challenges when you interact with individuals and you're trying to get, the gold from them is a feeling of trust, or that you're actually there to help them. One of the things that I've dealt with a lot, particularly as I mentioned, I've worked in call centers, is this feeling that this individual, by giving you that information, they are going to devalue their own worth inside of the organization, right? And so a very big part of that is showing that they are valued, and buying them lunch is a good way to start, right?
I agree.
And furthermore, it's really about saying that you're going to make their life easier with the products that you're giving them, that you're not there to just mine them and be a replacement. And so, yeah, that's been my own experience.
Well, I love that approach, because what you're doing, and this was made mention of in the Learning Rebels community space, is that first we have to set the stage, for a little bit of psychological safety there. We have to build our own personal connections before we just start jumping in people's lives and say, hey, what is it that you know? Right. And so what was the reaction, Nathan? So as you're trying to gather these stories up, was there a knock-on effect or a snowball, effect that went with this?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Right. So, if you're in a consultant role, or if you're in a salary role, your reputation is really important. Right. And so if you establish an open communication and an environment where employees feel valued, especially by you, then that has an immensely powerful effect as you go on in the relationship.
I think you said something really important there, that they feel valued by you, because that's one baby step to them feeling valued by their organization, because you represent the organization, right?
Absolutely.
I love that. Thank you for sharing.
I'd just like to point out that, Nathan, although I appreciate that, in some instances, that could almost be considered a bribe. But I love it, right? Because
bribery works.
I'm too nice to be worried about ethical considerations. That's
Roger that. No, but I think right. So it just like on pain points, you hit them where it hurts. So find out what the entry point is, right? And relationships do that. And I like the taking them out to lunch kind of thing, or share, right? It is about building that safe space with the individual to get them to share that knowledge or tell that story.
How do I know that it's information that is important, that needs to be shared, or that is good to share, versus something that really doesn't matter because it was someone did it for X amount of years and that's just the way they did it with no changes kind of thing? I'm someone who loves to have a list or a template or something to go by, because I feel like I'm not that creative on my own. I don't have come up with these great ideas, but I sure can use other people's ideas and go forward using them. And to me, it feels like there's almost some standards in there that could be developed to say, this is the kind of information that's really important to keep. And then even in those bite-sized things or bite-sized videos or podcasts, you could hit on those key points if you knew how to, just figuring that out. What are the key things for you to know? And granted, you can probably, I can probably come up with some of the key points, but I think about that, and that I don't always focus on the key points because I'm very detailed. I give way too much detail. I give the hour when people would like just a bite.
Just give me the 10 minutes, Connie. Give me the 10 minutes. Well, you know what? I'm looking at Melissa's comment and your comment, Connie. Man, trouble talking today. Ties directly in with what Melissa wrote here. And I really love this. I wrote this down myself. And this is almost a podcast in the making. Traditions, trash, and try. That's a podcast title just waiting to happen, for your organization. But I love that you have this idea or method rather of categorization, right? So we have this information, is this something that, and I'm paraphrasing here, and Melissa, you can expand on it, is, is this a tradition that, that the organization, it's part of the organizational heartbeat. This is a tradition that's within the heartbeat, right? And then you've got something that may work, it's trashable. So it may work for you, but not necessarily work for me, so do with it what you will. And then the triad, I love the triad. So the triad is the, early adopter, the pilot, the experiment, just give it a shot, see what happens, right? Did I get that right?
Yes. And I ultimately, and maybe it's because I was in the position so long, I wanted the person coming in to be successful too, because ultimately me leaving, I retired, it probably depends on the reason someone leaves, but I want them to be successful and I want the organization to be successful, because ultimately what they were doing, I wanted them to have that experience, but I didn't want them to think that trashing, it's like, you're not going to hurt my feelings. I don't work there anymore. So if something's not working for you, get rid of it. That I didn't want them to feel like they had to hang on to it because I did it.
Yeah.
But
I love that approach.
Those tradition things, I knew that it would be royally bad for them if I was like, don't not do this.
Well, see, and I love that. And that part of categorization there, Connie, can help you determine what is the information that should sit for the greater good, and then you can even, try to label it or what have you, So Jason, I see your hand.
Yeah, and that's Melissa's point is exactly kind of where I've been leading is what are those questions you want to ask your leaders or your subject matter experts? And so here's a tradition that we have to stick to. Here's something that we don't really need, we can trash it, or something that we need to try. And having a set of 3, 5, however many questions you want to ask of every person you interview is what's going to make a really good podcast, a really good interview, whatever you want to call it and however you want to turn it into. And I love the fact you use the word reusable, because that's where my mind goes all the time is, can I take these 2 minutes and put it into an e-learning to explain something else down the road? Can I take this as a part of a communication plan? Can I drop that out into Teams to tease something else down the line?
Exactly.
But having that framework of like, if I'm going to interview somebody, I'm going to always ask them these 3 or 5 questions. And I learned that from a podcaster.
Well, that's a great idea.
Year. And everybody gets those same questions and just where the story goes, where the conversation goes from there. But you always ask those 3 or 5 questions of each person as part of that conversation starter. And then I don't remember who said it earlier, but give it to them in advance so they can start thinking of those questions, start thinking of their answers. And then when you go in, just be prepared to focus on those items. And then you've got your content. You've got start building those repositories.
Right. And I love that. I love the idea. And it does go, I think it was with what I think Don was talking about it. No, Maureen was talking about it. Having them be prepared. So if you do, let's continue on the podcast idea, right? So before they jump into your podcast, you can tell them, I'm going to ask you this, and this. And then the conversation is going to go in the direction that it might naturally flow afterwards. So I think, you're setting them up for success when you do that, but it also gives the story a theme, so all of the story, you can link now all of the stories together. So I like that.
So you not only have a theme, but you have a possible title,
right?
You've got a brand, and then however you decide to push it out, people start to anticipate it. They know like once a month, they're going to hear this thing and they're going to get these ideas.
And Robin, I saw your comment in there about what you're trying to figure out is how the leaders of our organization can use stories and experiences to keep people engaged, informed, and involved. And I think this is what this is all about. This is exactly what this conversation is about. It's about harvesting that knowledge and those stories and those experiences. So I'm curious if you're willing to or can talk about this initiative and what you're discovering so far. I think would be really handy.
Well, haven't gotten that far yet, but what what we're trying to do is actually make people feel comfortable actually telling stories, right?
Right.
The people at the top, they're fantastic at it. You know, their TED Talk material and all of that stuff. But for your frontline managers or they don't even realize that they do it when they do it. So doing it purposefully becomes a challenge. They have an emotional block and I'm the same way, frankly. I know I tell a bad story. I jump to the, the end before I should. I forget important details that really make the story and that sort of thing. So we're having a mid-year meeting next month. And one thing I'm really trying to do is give people tricks or structure that can help them feel comfortable putting together their experiences in a format that is story-like, and then make it their own.
Mm-hmm.
And right now I've just got 1,000 ideas pumping through my brain, and none of them are very organized. And I'm hoping for a miracle, frankly, and that will help me tie it all together, make it useful for people, because I think people recognize the value, because we all have been on the other end of a story that really motivated us or helped us understand why this change is important, or gets us anxious to jump on a new initiative. But it's hard for us to see how we can use that on a day-to-day basis when I just want my folks to feel like they are valued, or I just want to have them make a change to the workflow or the process, or recognize the value of working in the office instead of from home, or whatever the situation is, and using stories to help explain the why, or the that sort of thing. So as you can see, it's a jumble right now, but I'm hoping to make it into a useful discussion.
Yes, I think it is. And one of the things that I appreciate what you're saying is the effort that it takes to find these stories and to build the stories and to structure and to host and, where they're going to live, is a new realm within our positions. So as L&D professionals, our jobs are just massively changing. And I think this is one of the areas that we need to pay more attention to. And it's beyond gathering documentation. It is getting to the heartbeat of your organization. And I think we all have a superpower for that, because our ability to connect with people is what makes us good at what we do. So then what does that look like? How do we go about it? And so for you, the struggle is real, but I also think that it's a struggle that most of us are either going to or have experienced, and we need to do this better.
Yeah. And to Erica's point, I think this is you don't want to have a 7-hour process to deliver a 2-minute story or a 30-second story, because that becomes very rightfully daunting and not valuable.
Oh, right. And nobody then wants to participate. And then you have
Right.
challenges that are completely different. Anyone else want to build on what Robin is talking about here?
Well, I did make a comment just about the cultural differences with a global audience that I've experienced. And I have found that when it comes to storytelling, for example, my Pakistani and Japanese colleagues are not comfortable telling a story that makes anybody look bad, right? On any level, particularly their leadership.
Yes.
And so it can be very, very difficult to get them to describe and diagnose the problems that they're experiencing. And so I just wanted to talk. I feel like storytelling is very, very vital to what we do. I do also think we tend to talk about it academically and like lean into this like almost like script writer approach to it. And that does seem like overcomplicating it, right? So, you know, those are my thoughts. Thanks for the opportunity to share.
Well, and thank you. And you're absolutely right. It's not shocking at all that a group of L&D professionals will overthink a process. That's also part of our DNA, you know, where things like storytelling, where cavemen got, you know, they all sat around the fire and drew pictures on the wall. That was not difficult. That was part of what their culture was. And that's how they communicated to the next family that moved into that cave. It's all, that's the process. Very simple. And how can we do better at, you know, replicating that particular process? And I think one of the things that I actually wrote down here when Robin was speaking was sometimes we do need a guide, not like a written guidebook or documentation, but maybe someone who's really good at pulling a story out of someone, you know. So it's that, for lack of better terms, it's that story guide person. It's that person, the interviewer. It's the Jimmy Kimmel. It's the person who is there and ready to listen and listen deeply and intently with heart to get to the bottom of what is happening. And that person may not even sit on your team. It may not even be you, but it may be someone within the organization that you know, who can help you with that. Right. And then I also appreciated what Erica said. What was it here about when gathering the stories, and I'm paraphrasing here, Erica, when gathering the stories, being inclusive of all levels of the organization, because you have people who are, your boots on the ground people who feel as though their stories don't have value. And if you can get those stories for them, show that they have value, help them understand that their stories have value, rather, then that kind of snowballs into other areas of the organization, where people then want to tell you their stories because you started this sort of an initiative.
A process that I'm a real fan of that I think then naturally can bloom into, then having these little small fingerlets kind of grow out of it, is when we're developing learning. I've learned to come to appreciate the idea that ask your SMEs about, well, what are the main pain points? Where are the points of failure when somebody is attempting to do this? And by starting off the conversation in that way, I think two things then naturally happen. And first of all, they're expressing their expertise to us, they're sharing, because a lot of people usually are very willing to tell you why things went wrong, more so than when things go well. And so obviously with us wanting to affect behavior change and move the needle from current state to future state, that's also the great way to posit that question. But then from that can also bloom, you then thinking about and then I'd like to ask this additional thing or that additional thing, or maybe they say, look, and then because this happens and this is a pain point, this is the reason why we need this, or why I'm feeling like this isn't happening the way it should. And then that, hopefully, if we're being non-judgmentally curious and being open to riffing with them, it's like, okay, well, so tell me more about that then. So what about this process that exists that you're feeling? And this connects to something that somebody said previously, and I apologize, I don't remember who that person was. So I think maybe even us starting off with asking where things aren't working, where there are those gaps, where are there usual points of failure, is a great way for people to then just want to talk. And then it not even feel too constricting as an interview. And then as long as we're being open, and then it's well, I don't need to ask that question. I don't need to ask that question. And then we're able to be fluid in that moment as well. And then I think that gives us a great repository because we get a lot more from them than maybe we initially thought. And then there might be different ways and different places that information can be utilized, even though our initial ask was maybe for this particular project.
I completely agree. And I love that approach. Maureen?
Yeah, so I was looking at Robin's comment about interviews are a good vehicle for telling a story. And it just reminded me of something like, if you set it up like a podcast or like a radio interview,
Thank
and
you.
you
Yes.
you let the person know ahead of time what the questions are. If they're not going to see the visual, some people are more comfortable having that. They just don't want to be on camera, regardless of what's there. That's one way to kind of get some of that knowledge drawn out in those stories. And then the other is, we have at our organization, it's the leaders, and they can't remember what it's called, but it's basically like a 30 seconds or 60 seconds. It's a relatively brief, but there's just like a topic that then they talk about, and they're
Right.
like, they share something that's there, and it just helps to share that information or knowledge across the organization. And that's just part of our culture, which is shifting to be much more open and collaborative than it was in the past. So, and I'd also said earlier, when we are speaking with people, don't overlook the opportunity to recognize and reward them for sharing that, because that may encourage others to be more open in sharing and not hold it so close to the vest. Because let people know how, it helps you feel valued, that there's, somebody wants to hear from you, learn from you.
We generally don't have a problem with our guys willing to just they're saying loose lips sink ships. If that were the case, we'd have no vessels, because our guys can talk. It's fine tuning it and then recording it, or finding the right place to house that. For instance, if we got a boat captain that's 35 years with that particular boat, who's getting ready to retire, there's no way you can infiltrate or even record all of that. We do a fairly good job of, anytime we're rolling out a new procedure, a new policy, a new way of doing things. Yeah, once we get it all written out, is bringing it to the craft level, to the field level, to the guys that this is truly going to affect a lot more than anybody else, and say, okay, here's where we're at. Tell us where we're missing the point, right? What are we missing? Or what are we saying that you actually don't do? What do you actually do, so that we can find that happy medium?
I think what you're saying there is really important, and I'm making a note of this. Part of gathering knowledge is the documentation of that knowledge, right? And I'll throw myself out there as an example. As some of you may or may not be aware, my virtual assistant, Amanda, went on vacation last week. Boy, there was a lot that I didn't have written down. And I'll tell you, it took Anne and myself to complete a task that Amanda usually does by herself. And it's like, oh my God, I thought we had good documentation. I really did, because we have little videos and everything else, but there were some gaps there that I really didn't realize until you have a key person, who dares to take a vacation. And I think what you're saying there, Douglas, is really important. It's that process of documenting not only the process or even anything else around a procedure, but then there's the real life documentation, right? So these are the steps, step 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there's always something in between there that you might be missing. And what is the real life story behind that process? So I love that example. I think it's a good one. Melissa?
I'll say this from my experience. I retired almost a year ago, and now I'm with another organization, but I spent 25 years in a school district in school communications, and the guilt of taking a day off or taking your vacation weighs on you heavily when you're the only person who does your job. So I reframed it in terms of teachers create sub plans, right? Creating substitute plans for yourself. So in your absence, someone else can do your job. Yes, there is that threat threshold you'll have, or are they going to take my job? But they need to know how to do it. If you get in an accident, if you are gone for a period of time. So I made a list of every program, a piece of software that I used on a day-to-day basis with the login information, the main reason we used that platform, what it was used for, and then went the next step saying, here are people you can contact in other districts who use the same stuff and will be able to support you if you run into a pinch. So it's a matter of your network, even outside your organization. Who do you know that can support you in a crisis that you would be able to reach out to? It's a matter of creating detailed notes and then putting it in practice, saying, okay, let's all trade, kind of have a boxing day like they do in Canada. Everybody trade jobs for the day. See if you can do what that plan says and act it out. We did that with our business office, a number of different ones, because the redundancy is important, even in every department, to be able to understand what everyone does, not as a threat, but to the success of the organization.
My follow-up question to that is, how can we then build those sorts of techniques into organizational practice? Because that's all part of harvesting, gathering organizational knowledge. And while it may be habit for you, and it may be habit, for Nathan, how can we help build that into our organizational structure?
For us, I can say my office was right outside the business office. They really struggled with that and didn't have that. You had somebody doing accounts receivable, somebody accounts payable, someone was facility reservation, but no, it was very siloed. And so it was just a matter of leadership saying, look, we're going to take time. You're going to block off this much time in your schedule to work on your processes, and then just have like a weekly or bi-weekly meeting saying, hey, how's the progress going? And just kind of checkpoints along the way for everyone and deadlines to get it done. Saying it becomes an expectation, saying we value you as an employee and we know you earn these days off, or you earn sick days. We don't want you coming to work when you're sick. All of those things, we framed it in that mentality, saying we value you and the time that you've earned. So putting these processes together will help you in the long run, because you feel like you can leave and take those days.
Mm-hmm.
And
yes.
That's what worked and was successful for us.
Yeah. And so it's kind of like a baby steps to help people. It's actually building a culture, isn't it? And I like Stella's comment there in the chat, Stella, if you want to expand on that, about making the subject matter experts, the heroes of the story, right?
Yes, the problem is always the SMEs don't have time. Everyone has no time. So then I have to try and charm them and tell them, well, listen, you can talk in the video. I put your photo, and all our distributors, the whole sales force, they will recognize you as the expert. And then some SMEs, they still say, I don't have time, you do it. But I can't do all the videos. I mean, who wants to listen to a middle-aged woman in 100 videos? So then I really use a lie. I tell them, listen, the board of directors, they are watching all the videos and they really think they are doing a great job and they accomplish it. So I'm lying, but I have the big intent,
right.
because we were talking the other day, we were talking about coaching and mentoring. So in 3 weeks, there's the summer party, and then I will go and ask one of the directors to coach me or to mentor me, so I get this right. I want to have, and I think they will help me, because it's important for small, we are only a medium-sized organization, so it's very important to communicate.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And I love that approach, and I think it's all in how we build the framework around it, how we approach people, how we talk to people, how we, like Douglas said, how do we address their pain points? And Nathan, Nathan's like, yeah, I'm gonna buy their
But I prepare everything for them. I do the slides with lots of visuals. I make a script, and then I tell them, you can change anything. I don't mind. It's your expertise, but don't make it any longer. You know, you can talk about anything, but not longer than 6 minutes. You know, shorter is okay, but not longer. Change. And some, they change a lot. And others, oh, it's fine, I just do it, you know. So people are so different, but I always leave them the option to modify.
And I think that that's another great technique that we can use to get subject matter experts to open up. You know, if we convince people to share their secret sauce, you know, are they going to go, well, I'm not competitive within my organization any longer? You know, so that's a barrier that we need to address when it comes to, you know, again, harvesting the knowledge of our organization so that the organization and the people within it can continue to be successful. So what are your thoughts around those barriers, Connie?
I think it's based on experience. At least it is in my case. I have experienced where the company valued me less because even though I had the knowledge, I had shared the knowledge. Now, I believe in sharing knowledge all the time, as much as I can. And I feel that, you know, if someone steals my knowledge per se and takes credit for, or just uses it to their advantage or knifes me in the back, shame on them. You know, I'm still going to share knowledge because I think knowledge is very important. But I think companies' approach to that is also very important. And not every organization makes sure that that knowledge is valued, and that if it's shared, they want everyone to share it. They want everyone to document, but then they don't even, like sometimes in my organization, someone new will come in and they won't even take them through any of that. And so it's like repeating yourself over and over again. And it's like, okay, well, we already set it up, and it's okay to change and offer new ways, but not until you know what we did and why we did it. Then you can make good changes. But if you just come in and say, well, I think we should do it this way, and you do not have the background of the 12 years that I do and why we're doing it the way we do it, then you're disrespecting the fact that of the history and the background and why people are doing what they're doing. That doesn't mean you don't want change. I mean, we do want change and new ideas, but only if it's based on solid information and knowledge of the organization and how things work. So I've been burned multiple times with sharing knowledge. But again, I believe in sharing knowledge no matter what. But it really makes people wary of organizations and of other people.
I get it. And I'm sure we've all have been in that position before. I think all of us have, where all of a sudden, and especially, and not to take this too terribly off topic, but especially for the ladies in the room, you know, where we share information, we share knowledge, and then it gets picked up by somebody else. And suddenly that idea gets wiped away as being yours. You know, so that happens. And I think this is why the documentation of the knowledge is important. You know, where we have a process to gather those stories and a process to gather that intellectual bit, you know, so that way it can go on record to say, this whole process was Connie's, and this is what we do. You also said something else that I would like to talk about, which is we take the stories, we take the knowledge, but then we don't do anything with it. You know, so I think that was also
that's just our protecting our end of the secret knowledge deal, right?
Is it? Okay, talk to me, Nathan.
Oh, well, no, frankly, I was just saying, right. So there are moments where you have a conversation with an SME and they give you some knowledge that I would describe as almost like secret sauce, right? Like that frankly, even you can't communicate it to the learning audience if you wanted to, right? And so I was just going to say, you know, when you leave that off the presentation, you're kind of just filling in your end of the bargain that I was kind of talking about really. So that's my only point. And I'm sorry for interjecting. That was
no, you can interject. You can interject. Anybody can interject. You guys got a point, shout it out. You all most of you are familiar with this Learning Rebels process. Okay. And so now, and I think what you bring in up, Nathan, was just another, even though tongue in cheek, still a good point, because other people, your salespeople, are protecting their jobs by hoarding. And sometimes we protect our jobs also by hoarding. So what's the example that we're trying to set? So Erica, I see your hand.
To the point that you were making, Shannon, about like, if we're going to go through any process of doing the collection of the stories or the knowledge, and then making sure that they just maybe don't sit idle in a repository, maybe if you're able to anchor it to something. So meaning like, are you able to anchor it to an initiative that's going on at the organization? Or are you able to anchor it to maybe one of your high level cheerleader who wants to assure like, oh, this is a really great idea. This is awesome work. And an example in what I'm noodling off of is I'm on a project right now that actually was instigated by a higher level VP to help to help create a more standardized way to train what is called a tier 1 associate within a small, tiny little call center in our human resources in central HR at USC that's called the HR Service Center. And what we've come to understand by doing a lot of seeking to understand, we've had a lot of seeking to understand meetings with these individuals. It's the manager, and it tends to be their 3 main trainers that are also leads. And they are actually very excited about this process. They're very happy that they're getting the support of like a learning and development organization that's coming in. And now we're at the place, this is very well timed, that we're trying to get whatever that content in current state that isn't recorded somewhere, but they know that they're training off of, meaning they're doing things rote. Shannon, like you mentioned, you and On thought you'd be able to do something, real quick, you thought you had good documentation. They're aware that they're training off of things that are very much the folklore knowledge, but it's not recorded. We seem to have been able to capitalize off of the idea that this was already something that someone else instigated. They were going to go a kind of a different direction. We've been able to sort of educate them through performance consulting about like, that shouldn't be the end result of all of this. We have the beauty, and all of you are going to be like, oh, you suck. We aren't being pressured to do this in like a month, because this is going to be a years-long process, because there's 3 levels within this call center. But the ability of us now that we're going to try and get legacy information out of their brains, we are going to record those meetings, or if it's a mock training, however we can get that information out of them. And we are fortified by the fact that this project has been, greenlit, stamped of approval. So it behooves us, and it actually then shows, to the point that then I guess Nathan was making about like whether or not we're going to sit on stuff, even if we collected it, to then transmit, and then elevate their training by getting it all then into a standardized format, so that we do have a learning journey, and we've got all of those things that may be inside of their head. And they're like, oh, I'm thinking about it now, so I'm going to train this person on it, but I forgot about it and I don't train the next person. So I think that helps us to feel like we've got fire in our bellies of like making sure, oh, we're going to do good capturing of this information. And then we really want to make sure that we're going to be able to say, this can get turned into this sort of artifact, whether it's e-learning or if it's a more streamlined ILT, et cetera, et cetera. I know that we don't always have maybe that sense of like, is somebody rooting for us, but are there ways that we can think about it that anchors it to something, so that we're feeling that motivation and generation of making sure that we don't collect it all and then just not do anything with it?
Right. And subsequently, that's the issue at hand, right?
Yeah, it was just in my, in my my mid-year review, I thought it was like, oh, I was like, didn't know how to take this, but it was that I have, what does it say? That I have great tribal knowledge that was immensely helpful
Oh,
to
nice.
advance the project, because based on different experiences I've had through the years, I could pull in some key learnings from that and apply it to, what we were doing, which is to onboard a whole bunch of new hires in a particular area. So
Mhm.
anyway, it was just funny, tribal knowledge. I'm
Right.
like, oh, okay.
Okay. All right.
I guess that's what
Okay.
it's called.
You are the keeper of the knowledge. Got
I
it.
guess. I mean, but I shared it in a way where it's like, I don't just dump it. It's just like, okay, if something comes up, I go, oh, okay, let me share. Like, it's always in the context of when somebody's
Mhm.
learning something, so then it can be retained.
Mhm. Well, see, and I love the idea, and it kind of ties in nicely with what Erica was saying, about the discovery process. And I love the you know me, I'll take a podcast as a solution any day of the week, because it fits in so many places and it fits here. So if you created a podcast series, and I'll just go with your example there, Maureen. So if the podcast series was quote unquote, 60 seconds of, or 6 minutes about XYZ, 6 minutes about sales, 6 minutes about customer service, 6 minutes about our CEO, 6 minutes about, right. And if you follow that sort of path, then people will listen, people will pay attention, and then those stories just by default become part of the organization. And then you can create, other branching type of, audio, to go along with it. But I think that that's a great way of gathering, organizational knowledge and organizational stories.
Yeah. And what's interesting too is they used to be the ones with the leaders, like the armchair conversations or whatever, used to be a longer video, audio, whatever, and that people at first liked it when it was all new and shiny, but they pivoted and modified what it was, because people are like, yeah, we don't have time for that anymore. So now it's just much more brief, so it's much more palatable because it's bite-sized to take it in, and then that also can spur the conversation where other people then contribute some of their lessons as well.
Right. And you can also do different branches of it, right? So you could have a full conversation like this, and it's an hour, and then you can say, for those people who really want the in-depth, here's an hour. For those of you who are on your 30-minute lunch break, here's 30 minutes. For those of you who just want the bite size while you're on the treadmill, here's 10. And then you can take from that longer piece and just take key points and put that together, and it all becomes, a reusable, a term from the 80s, right? That reusable learning object, where you can recycle. And a last piece of big news here is that all of our Learn Something news, as well as the information that's being shared in the community, are now eligible for APTD, and CPTD certification points. So we are very excited by that. So if you have your ATD certification, your Association for Talent Development certification, any of our courses now, you can get points for recertification. So there's another incentive to participate in the Learn Something New events, as well as to join the community, because we do have learning themes each month that you can get credit for. So super excited by that. Yay! Just a reminder, the process has changed. I used to email the resources to you. Now they sit on the website. So you just go down into learningrebels.com, find the coffee chat resources, and they will be up and loaded within the next 24 to 48 hours. I hope you guys have a fabulous weekend. And thank you for all of the ideas today. Y'all are wonderful as usual. Thank you, everyone, for hanging with us for another Learning Rebels Coffee Chat. I love how passionate we are about collecting knowledge and stories. And I wasn't kidding when I said that the skill of curation, the ability to gather, disseminate, and share stories and knowledge is a key skill area for L&D. Our jobs are changing at a speed we've never seen before, and being a strong curator will enhance your business partner connections. But the struggle is real. How can we gather stories when people want to hoard information? People will hoard when they feel less than. The big tip was to be sure we are first connecting. Remember, seek first to understand. People need to feel as though they are being valued by us, the story collectors. This means once we make the connection, we must be able to act on it. How are we sharing the stories and knowledge? Through storytelling programs? Internal podcast stories? Then ask ourselves, how are the stories anchored? Are they connected to the organizational mission? Are they connected to a project or a particular team? Now, I'm still stuck on the idea of traditions, trash, and try. I think that would make a great internal podcast title for someone out there. But with that in mind, there's a lot to consider. How can we recognize and reward those who do contribute? How can we not overcomplicate the story gathering process? L&D is good at one thing, and that one thing is overcomplication. So we need to not do that. So when we're thinking about the concept of traditions, trash, and try, then it's about documenting the findings. This is an important step. And just as everything, building a plan to gather, review, and share. Now, there's nothing worse than making a big deal of curating stories and knowledge and then not doing anything with them. Don't be that person. Want to join us live? And you know you do. Go on over to learningrebels.com, check out the events page, and sign on up. And don't forget to check out the Learning Rebels community, where you can have an opportunity to build your knowledge and connect with other cool L&D professionals. In the meantime, stay curious, be rebellious, and take over the world. Bye for now.